welcome to PM Talks episode 10. We are delighted, we being Dom and Colin, we'll do intros in a minute, to have Paul Sims with us from Impatient Health. And we are hot off the heels of Pharmageddon in Amsterdam. And we really want to explore a little bit more about what happened there and get some more take from Paul as to what he feels the importance of that event was and where indeed it goes from there. So very briefly, some introductions. So hi, I'm Don Marchant, current chair of the PM Society. Colin?
Yeah, hi everyone. Colin from the PM Society, long-standing board member.
And Paul?
And I'm Paul. I am generally a very impatient person, and I run Impatient Health and trying to shake up our industry.
And Paul, maybe a little bit more, if you don't mind, about what you're doing with Impatient Health and a bit more about your background so that we're all up to speed when we talk Pharmageddon.
Sure. I ran industry conferences and events for about 20 years. Fell into it accidentally, like so many people in our industry do. And then you realize the pulling power of our industry. We're dealing with life and death. We are doing theoretically a very important job, but the way I see it is that we are yet to fulfill our potential, and the reason, the thing that keeps me is the fact that we've still got so much work to do. And you may have heard me say I describe our industry as a young industry. Of course, we usually describe it as traditional, rigid, conservative, old-fashioned, all those things, but on a kind of evolutionary timeline, I think that we are still close to the kind of single-celled amoeba. I think it was only a decade ago, you walk into a pharma company, and if you didn't see the logo on the door, you wouldn't even know which one you were in. They were all so similar. Only recently have they begun to kind of form species, if I can use my evolutionary metaphor, and form the kind of, dwell in the habitats that patients need, and actually become more relevant to patients as a result. And I kind of see my job now. I started Impatient Health in 2020, middle of lockdown, really trying to speed up that industry evolution.
That's a very good segue as well into why we're talking, because PM Society is all about advancing standards. Yeah. And I think that's our kind of common North Star, if you like, between your organisation, Impatient Health, and what you're doing with Pharmageddon and other things, and what the PM Society is trying to do as well. We're both trying to advance standards. I would say somewhat differently in approach and methodology. You're trying to blow things up. We're trying to sort of course correct, if you like. But it's great that we've got a common aim. And in full disclosure, we're looking to help each other out in terms of making our membership aware of what you guys are doing at Impatient Health. And similarly, Impatient Health are trying to make aware their community, if you will, of what we're trying to do at the PM Society. So full disclosures there. Brilliant. Okay, let's get into the first topic. And the topic is, well, it had to be Pharmageddon Europe, 7th to the 8th of October in Amsterdam. Colin and I were delighted to be there. We have a lot of observations ourselves, but that's almost irrelevant. We're very keen to hear what your observations are, Paul, as the ringmaster, if you will.
I mean, we painted the industry as the Titanic in this particular event. We've often heard it described as a tanker because it's slow moving and takes a long time to turn. The Titanic was just a more extreme version because we all know what happened to that. And it was the arrogance, the complacency of the Titanic that drew me to that metaphor, the fact that it felt it was invincible and then it was actually killed by something relatively small, and even afterwards didn't recognize that it was going to sink until it then did. Passengers, of course, the 900 and odd passengers on board, who suffered much like the patients if we don't get this right. So what is the solution? Obviously, being more agile and obviously having a ship that can be turned. But also, if you look at the actual story of the Titanic, that complacency ran into so many different areas. They didn't even have proper binoculars in the lookout's nest. And being able to spot and actually appreciate the vulnerability of the ship. I think that pharma just thinks it can get away with it. We're just too happy. We're too fat and lazy, as I think I said at Pharmageddon. And we're perfectly happy to probably earn an above average salary and be pretty comfortable without ever really having to risk anything. So I, at the same time, with Pharmageddon, want to create that sense of fear. But as you just said, we both have, standards, advancing standards. And I want to also give people a bit of a carrot. We hit ourselves with a stick. We're not good enough. But what you do with your awards, and what I think you do with advancing standards, is you show people that there is a vision, there is a possibility. It is actually available to us going above and beyond. And without that, what motivation do we have to actually change and get better? I can't see any. We can continue to tell ourselves we're not good enough as an industry, we're not real marketers, we're not talented, we have too many rules, all of this stuff. But unless you've got that incentive, you'll never drive through it all.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I think a lot of people in the industry, whether it's you, Paul, individually, or Impatient more general, Pharmageddon, can look on the outside in and go and potentially sort of do a bit of an eye roll sometimes. Some people go, oh, what these guys are trying to do, they don't understand, and so forth. I think, and I talk from a personal purview of one pharma company, but have a sense from others that the reality is actually slightly different, but actually is moving towards the same direction that I think both the PM Society and Impatient are trying to help create, which actually there is slowly an increasing sense of urgency and an increasing understanding that pharma isn't as comfortable. The slippers aren't quite as comfortable as they were 20 years ago. I think we're trying to do the right thing and try and say the right thing, not anti or against what pharma's sentiment is, perhaps 10, 15, 20 years ago, in terms of we're fine, thanks, go away. Actually, they're feeling it a lot more. So I think you will see increased momentum and desire around this area.
Yeah, agree completely that the change is happening more quickly than it ever has. Also, want to make it very clear, I don't blame anyone in pharma. Trust me, if I was sitting inside a pharma company right now, I'd be trying to stick between the rails and do my job well 99% of the time. It's incredibly difficult to bust outside of that. I mean, it's dangerous. But I also think that that's not a reason for someone like me to provoke and poke and constantly show people what might be possible on the other side. And sometimes I describe myself as a translator, because I'm constantly trying to look at other industries, other ways of doing things, ideas that may be mine or maybe someone else's, but could potentially work in pharma. And I didn't say this in my introduction, but the truth is I have no healthcare qualifications whatsoever. I've never worked a day for a pharmaceutical company, for an agency, for a consultancy, for any of these types of organizations. So I'm very much an outsider. And for a while, that meant I felt like I was a pest. I was just, cajoling and being an irritant, frankly. And it was only when I started getting positive feedback, I realized that actually I do have an important role to play. If there isn't that kind of, a biologist would call it mutation pressure, so pressure to evolve, then you won't evolve. And I have to be that external reality check, whatever you want to call it, to actually drive that evolution. So let's hope we can do it in a friendly way, holding hands, but recognize at the same time that industry of, I love the analogy of slippers there, that 10-year slipper wearing industry 10 years ago is probably something we need to move beyond.
You mentioned imposter syndrome because you haven't worked within a pharma company or indeed an agency, and those typically are the two food groups that we talk about, particularly at the PM Society. Yeah. There are others, but those are the two biggest.
Those are the most ambitious, yeah.
Yeah, but having that different perspective, as opposed to possibly jaundiced from having worked in either of those, gives you a different viewpoint. Now, I'm going to push you a bit on that because you've got two events, Pharmageddon Europe and Pharmageddon US. So, as an outsider almost, quotes almost, looking in, what is the difference between Europe and US pharma?
Very interesting question, because I've done now over 20 years of running events, and historically the US was always the place where there was a greater spirit, can-do, positivity, willing to think. Obviously the rules are a little different, particularly around marketing, and it gave them this sense of opportunity. And in 2025, I've now run both events, and it took me about half a day, maybe even the full day of the first day of the event to realize that the American audience was taking a long time to warm up. And I didn't know if it was something I said. I don't know if, I just brought the wrong people into the room. I didn't know what it was. And it was only when I sort of actually thought about it and sort of read between the lines that it was the external political climate that was actually pervasive, and people were just not happy to speak up, not happy to put themselves. And I think that they were so afraid of doing so on a daily basis, it had become like a sclerosis, a kind of natural way of being for them. And it did take a while and a lot of energy. And ironically, the second day was much better as a result. So it did a full 180 degree. Typically, Europeans have been the most reserved, and it was vice versa. So, I don't want this to become a political conversation. And, there may even be some things that the current American administration is doing right. A lot of people think it needs some pressure, our industry, to change. And I certainly advocate for pressure, as I already said. But I do worry that the fear element is killing the experimentation, which is going to create those mutations that I said earlier and actually allow us to change. I don't think fear is the best way of ruling our industry.
You talk about Pharmageddon being disruptive, a power of disruption within the industry, much needed. How do you calibrate that? How do you measure success?
I'll keep it succinct. Bloody difficult, particularly as it's different for everybody. And indeed, people need to be able to justify coming, to show their boss, what am I going to get out of it? The truth is, I can't. I have to hold people individually accountable for themselves. So try to create accountability pods. We called it forming your crew to fit with the Titanic theme. And make sure that whatever future you design for yourself, and we encourage, of course, you to push outside of the box for that, you actually check in and ensure that you are making it happen. There is not going to be a one-size-fits-all measurement that I can put in. Also, one issue I have is that we love data in our industry. That's not a bad thing, but it means we over-index on what can be quantified, and we under-index what is qualitative. So things like storytelling get steamrolled because you can't put a graph very easily against it. Likewise, there are very important things that we focus on in industry, some of the emotionally resonant behavioral stuff that is key. We're a human industry. But if it doesn't translate to data, it doesn't happen. And that's an issue we need to counteract.
Okay. And then, so picking up on that point about we are a human-centered industry, ultimately we're about the patients, so it can get more human, really. There was one subject, and I'll hand over to Colin to give a bit more of an industry question or response to, but there was one presentation that I think ruffled the most feathers from those that I spoke to. Definitely made me feel a bit angry. That's a good thing, and it was talking about how AI was disrupting the agency model. And I thought it was a very brave presentation to give, talking about how the human-powered elements, if you will, of an agency were being completely diminished, replaced by AI agents. And there was still a role for humans within the agency, but it was much less reliant on particularly what I would call craft roles. And I just wondered what your thoughts were about that particular angle, that viewpoint.
I think at the moment, like any new wave of things we talk about, and luckily for this meeting, we're not talking about omni-channel because that's a topic well trodden. I think like so many other pieces before, though, I think it's very easy to stand on stage and talk on a subject like that and sensationalize what it is and what it might be, and to kind of give the audience a sense that it's here or it's coming very quickly. My view again would be, I think, from an industry point of view, that the industry is increasingly looking to take a pragmatic approach and view on AI. I think at the moment it's trying to get a broad understanding of what it is, what the different tools and pieces are that are out there. We're starting to think about the practical application of that. Thank God, because it's like anything. If you just say, "Oh, let's all do omni-channel or let's all do AI," what does that mean? at least now we're starting to think, let's double down on that. Now we have an understanding of what it is, broadly. Actually, how can you practically use that to benefit marketing as a function, a brand holistically, your relationship with your customers, and so on. So I think partly because pharma has a lot of very good things about it in terms of intelligence, innovation, and so forth within its walls, but also because of some of the constraints the industry naturally has, it does move a little bit slowly, not quite the Titanic these days, Paul, but still can be a slow vessel, and moves with a degree of caution, which again is understandable considering the environment it has. I don't see that sensational level coming and coming sort of soon. I think there was a lot of talk in Amsterdam around the efficiencies and process improvements that AI can create. Great. That could be within a pharma company, could be in terms of their relationship with third parties and agencies, in terms of just making things more efficient. I think generally the industry understands that you still need people, you still need intellectual capital, particularly around some of those amazing industries that we support very strongly from a PM Society point of view, around creativity especially. I don't hear anything and don't believe anything around that suggests that it's going to blow up the service industry at all. It's just going to get more out of them.
I actually think that the world of agencies is going to be okay. I think that by 2030, we'll have gone through a trough of disillusionment with a lot of AI, and we'll be back to understanding that the human agency is strong and proud. And even though the provocation that you mentioned, Dom, of that talk, where they did Pareto's rule, 80% AI and 20% human, that may well be how they're going to try and start today. And there's a lot of efficiency improvements, as Colin said, that need to be sorted. And that human element of creativity is the 20%. But then I think that over time, that 20% will grow. I think that all agencies will find the efficiencies. It's like the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of AI, if you like, that, that operational effectiveness is what everyone will do. And it will expand the role of the human. So yes, it might be threatening to you today, to anyone today. But if you, I think that, it's just so hard to sort of foresee, obviously, but I think that if you were to fast forward a few years from now, the human element would be expanded and all of the operational stuff will just be not even talked about anymore, in the same way that we don't talk about sending an email anymore. Once upon a time, it was exciting. It no longer is worthy of discussion. And we'll focus on what humans can do.
When you start to look away from efficiency and start looking at effectiveness, then AI suddenly becomes an enabler and enables people to do better work. I will say, though, your reference about the email, I think that's very pertinent, because there used to be the guy, it was one of my first jobs, the mail guy who would carry internal mail around, I am that old. And email killed that. Yeah, absolutely. There are going to be some roles that are made redundant, but I do feel that you will probably have more jobs through AI. So what does utopia look like? We talk about Pharmageddon, which sounds like end of the world, obviously. Yeah. So what does utopia look like for you from your discussions, your experience?
Well, I like the evolution metaphor, because you also notice that a bird is not necessarily better than a fish, and neither of them are better than a lion. They're all just adapted to the habitat that they want to own and thrive in. So some companies will focus on chronic disease. Some companies will focus on high science. Some companies might become more of a concierge service and be incredibly patient-oriented and less focused on their individual therapy. I know that feels really hard to believe right now, but there are green shoots of all of these things. And you can actually almost study evolution and the different habitats that people need, and make quite solid predictions as to where the industry will go. Of course, the timelines are the bit that are under question. I don't know if it's going to happen next year or in the next 50 years. All we can do is try and get there more quickly. As I say, the pressure needs to be increased. So that means exposure to patients, exposure to new ideas, exposure to mutations and things that get you to those habitats more quickly. All of that is desirable. But the exact utopia, well, I think it depends on whether you want to be a bird or a fish. There is no single answer.
would you be averse to other industry experts, say from consumer, retail, automotive, being at Pharmageddon in the future? Is that something you've been doing?
No, I actually think it's one of the best or most important criticisms of the industry, because there are too many industry people on the stage at the moment talking about industry things, and none of that cross-pollination is happening unless we get specific alternative futures, i.e. examples from other industries that may or may not work. It's not up to me to decide, that idea from financial industry can be translated across, although I do try. It's a matter of hearing those things in detail, and then the person in the audience identifying what genes can be transferred, if any. But if we don't have the specific, concrete, but differentiated use cases, those alternative futures, then I don't think we'll get there. So that is absolutely something I have to work on for the future.
Yeah, I was going to say really quickly, I think the industry talks an awful lot about outside-in thinking, bringing that sort of world view in. I think, yes, bringing someone from Yves Saint Laurent to talk to a farmer about what they're doing in their industry, right? Fine. But you often then get the criticism of, well, that doesn't work in pharma. People talk about Netflix and Amazon all the time.
Yeah.
When are you going to become the Netflix of pharma? Again, fine to a point, but then you get too much of that we can't do it. So I think yes to external. I think there's a good play to say, let's try and find at least initially those adjacent industries.
Yeah.
So those that are around us, yes, it could be similar in terms of its constrained thinking, finance, or environment. Finance is a good one, but also those a little bit more close to home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point as well. We often think about the brilliant examples and how, particularly in 10, 15 years ago, digital completely disrupted the music industry, for example. But you bring all of those examples to bear in pharma, it is very hard to translate. And Paul, you mentioned earlier, you are, at worst, a translator. I think there is an importance of translation within our industry, in the pharma industry.
I can only be a good translator if I understand pharma well enough. I can't just be an outside force, to emphasize Colin's point. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was my point. So well done for stealing it. Is the ability to understand both sides is almost unique. I don't see many people being able to be expert in pharma and in retail, tourism, or whatever.
I think, Dom, you might be on the one foot in either camp as well. Don't
So to close then, really, Paul, this is where the floor is yours. What is next for Impatient? What is next for Pharmageddon? What is next for Paul? Please fill in the blank.
Oh, wow. Well, I can tell you something I've never told anyone, but there's a project I'm working on. I'm actually writing a book at the moment called, it's going to be called Killing Horses. And the reason it's called that is because Henry Ford, he didn't actually say it, but apparently said, if you ask customers what they want, they would have said a faster horse. Mm-hmm. The truth, and therefore, we rely a little bit too heavily on market research and what our customers say. I say we're customer followers and we need to be customer leaders. And if you think about leadership, if you were to read a book on leadership, it would be all about rallying your own troops and organizing your own company or organization. It wouldn't be about leading people outside the company. And I think that there is a massive role to play here for inspiring instead of informing or educating. And I think that we can do marketing differently. Basically, if we are willing to show first and then listen, as opposed to listen and then respond accordingly. So I think that's something that is a personal project that's very exciting to me. Obviously, not relevant particularly to pharma, especially just anyone. We are within pharma. We want to kind of take some of we do these solve sessions within Pharmageddon, have very hands-on things, and we want to turn that into an entire sort of hackathon type event and actually see if we can create something new. One of my biggest bugbears is the fact that so many intelligent people travel to a conference and then sit there passively at the back of the room doing their emails. And I just think it's such a waste, such a horrible waste of talent, of time, of climate impact, of everything. And so, just getting people to roll their sleeves up and build something new that they would never have got the chance to build within their own four walls. And maybe Colin's right that we shouldn't take examples from Netflix, but I do think that deep within there is a sort of an inventor in a lot of us, and that we could create something at least adjacently new. So a couple of exciting things that we have on the horizon there.
That's brilliant. I
Of course,
think
I forgot to mention the incredible partnership with PM Society.
well, obviously,
All of the amazing things that will bring, which of course is far more important than anything else.
I appreciate you plugging us as we get to the end as well. So
Just
to
in case.
return that favour, Colin and I had a great 2 days at the Pharmageddon event in Amsterdam. I think just personal reflections before I hand over to Colin. The excitement and positivity in the room those are the two key words that I would use: excitement and positivity. The fact that people were willing to think outside the box, to get out of their comfort zone and challenge their own thinking, and maybe go back with renewed interest in taking innovation into what they do day to day. I quite enjoyed the fact that it wasn't just hyperbole, it wasn't just talk and theory and conjecture, that there were some practical applications to it, and to loop back to advancing standards, which is obviously the PM Society's sort of mantra. It felt very aligned with that.
The fact that people were thinking about how could they have the courage to affect change, the courage to do something slightly different, the courage to just challenge the norms in the industry when they're back. I also like the sort of the sentiment around startup culture. I don't think it's an avenue to go into detail in this summary, but I think that can mean a number of things. But I think pharma's openness to embrace what that sort of startup culture can bring to their evolution, I think, is really important. A couple of very quick extra takeaways I've briefly mentioned, but I think we talked a bit at the event. I'd like to see us more. I think there's a real opportunity to really drive, and it comes from AI and all the other things, really drive a learning culture in the industry. So people constantly looking to learn. Again, it's continually looking to get rid of those slippers, going back to that. I really want, and it goes back to courage, for people to think about how they can drive behavioral change within their company, and then that's seen out in their customer land with impact, and really to sort of be brave to move beyond tick box vanity metrics. I think is a big thing the industry tends to do. And the last thing, going back to Paul's point, I think, yes, I agree with you in terms of your book, in terms of going beyond listening, 100% agree. However, I do think that as a step in that direction, the industry does need to have a proper listening culture, properly listen to their customers, understand what they're doing, and act upon that, rather than assuming they know first.
I want to be very clear. It's about provoking and then listening, but definitely making sure you keep that listening there. You absolutely cannot get rid of it. So I don't think we are misaligned, but thank you, Colin.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Well, that's a great conclusion. A bit of harmony. They're all agreed on that.
Unexpected.
No, it's terrific. Paul, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting Colin and I, first and foremost, for the experience, and for obviously this opportunity to talk to you and do a quick follow-up for the event. Let's continue talking, and hopefully we'll have more to say soon. Thank you.
You're welcome. Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Tom.